Well, as you're being seated, I hope you'll take your Bibles and let's turn together to Matthew chapter 5. We're not quite to that time of year yet, but in just a matter of a few weeks, high schools and colleges across this country will be holding graduation ceremonies. We've got several here within our church that will be celebrating during that time, and they're most often called commencement ceremonies. The word itself meaning a beginning. And the point of all of that is for us to see things differently. It's not uncommon for those who are going through graduation to view it as an end. Finally, I've arrived after all of this time and all of this effort. I've arrived at the end. But the point of a commencement ceremony is to see all of the instruction, all of the training, all of the preparation as enabling us to begin to live differently, in possession of knowledge and skills that equip a person for a bigger role in the world than they would have had before. And I think that's a fitting illustration for how we should view these first 12 verses of Matthew chapter 5. It's an opportunity for us to see the training and the preparation that has gone on and now should begin to affect how we live our lives. And so as we continue discovering what Christianity is all about, our commencement, our beginning, is to use all that Jesus has done in us, what He's done through us, what He's modeled for us, to be able to fulfill a bigger role in this world. You see, we are now, as followers of Jesus Christ, called to communicate a message of hope to a hopeless world. That's the very heart of what we're called to do. Jeff has shared the opportunity to go and do that in places where there is tremendous darkness. And yet we're called to share hope in a hopeless world. The trouble is, communication in our world today seems to be getting more and more difficult. I was reading this week a Psychology Today study about communication, and it said only 7% of the impression or the impact that we make on other people is based on what we say. Only 7% is based on the content of the message that we communicate with others. 38% of our effective communication comes about by the way we say it. As I've been told many times by my wife or my kids, sometimes I don't hear what you say, I hear the way you say it. I hear the volume or the tone, or 38%. But I was shocked to realize that 55% of our effectiveness in communication is based on what others see while we say it. And just kind of let that sink in. More than half of our ability to communicate, it comes from what people see in us as the ones who are doing the communicating. In other words, to fulfill our role as believers in this world means that a clear message has to be accompanied by a clear and right character. That if that's not there, then nothing we say is going to genuinely make an impact in people's lives. If our lives don't show the beauty of the message that changed and shaped us, then our role will never be fulfilled. And that's the point of one of Jesus' most familiar challenges to His followers. In Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 13, Jesus said these powerful words. He said, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. So let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. You know, for the first time in this sermon that Jesus began in verse 3 of Matthew 5, for the first time, Jesus changed from the third person to the second person. Up until now, he's been talking about those who have or people who do these things, and now it becomes personal. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. This is a very personal message. What Jesus is saying to us is that if you are a follower of mine, if you are one who has taken up the cross to follow Him, then this applies to you. What He is saying is for you. He is laying out the expectation of every follower of Christ. Every one of us. Not preachers, not missionaries, not just deacons or really committed people, but every single follower of Christ. And He lays that out, in essence, by answering questions that we're most likely to ask about what it means to follow Him. And the first question is, okay, now that this work has been done in my life, who am I? And now that I've been changed by the grace of God, and the mercy of God has been applied to me, what is my role? And Jesus says in verse 13, you are the salt of the earth. You are. You don't have any choice. If you have given your life to me, if you are now a recipient of the grace that Jesus has offered, you are the salt of the earth. Now, we need to understand the concept of salt, and you've probably heard people talk about this or teach on this numerous times, but and certainly in your studies through history, you know that there wasn't any such thing as refrigeration in Jesus' day. And so salt was the very thing that was used when decay was present. And so it was something that was only needed when decay was likely to happen. And so for Jesus to say, you are salt in this world, you are to be the salt of the earth, what He's saying in essence is our world is decaying. When we look around, we understand that. We understand that marriages are decaying, that homes are decaying, governments are decaying, morality has decayed, decency, civility, all those things are in an extreme state of decay. And when things decay, inevitably it leads to collapse. Back around sometime in the fall, my wife had bought some pumpkins. And we had put them out in different places, and somehow they managed to get out on our back patio area. And it was sometime later, after the first of the year, when I noticed one of those pumpkins was still out there, and I thought, it's January, that thing's been out there a while, it probably needs to go. So I went out back to pick up the pumpkin and go throw it away. You know what happened when I picked that pumpkin up? It just completely fell in on itself. And it was a disgusting mess. You know what? That's the picture of decay that Jesus is warning about. When things decay, they inevitably collapse. And our calling, our role in this world is to prevent decay and to win people to Christ. And we cannot sit by as believers and isolate ourselves or insulate ourselves from this world and just wait for the collapse. Salt is a preservative. We seek to prevent the decay in our culture. It preserves and it seasons whatever it touches. If the world is not better for our presence as believers, then we haven't understood our role properly. As we go about living our lives, we need to be the very ones who make a priority of telling the truth, of refusing to play by the world's rules, of standing for human life, or helping the hurting, loving our neighbors, upholding class and dignity in this world. That's who we as Christians ought to be every single day. And yet far too often as Christians, what we've become are people who have a veneer of morality and religion slapped over tactics that look just like the world. So we're not preventing decay, we're showing evidence of it. We're called to be different. This is truly the counterculture type of existence, to be salt in this world. You know what? Salt also helps to generate thirst, does it not? If you like to go eat Mexican food, as I do, and you know that the first thing they're going to bring you is a basket full of chips, and the more you eat, the thirstier you get because of how salty those things are. And as salt, we can live in a way that generates a spiritual thirst for living water, something that they don't already have. Our lives should create such a spiritual thirst in the people that we come in contact with that they long to see that thirst quenched, which gives us the opportunity to point them to one who, as Jesus described himself, is the living water. But he added to that role, not only are we salt, but we are to be the light of the world, verse 14 says. Now, the same way that salt is only needed when the threat of decay is present, light is only needed when? When it's dark. Light is needed in a dark world. Now, our world feels enlightened, and they think that they've got it all figured out. But the truth is, our world has a whole lot of knowledge and very little wisdom. We know a lot of stuff, and if we don't, we know where to go to get it. The knowledge aspect is there, but the darkness shows in the way our world thinks about God, about themselves, about society or relationships or work or family. That darkness is evident all around us, and the reason is man has rejected the light. And when the light is not there, he can't see a clear path. Listen, I think we live in a world not only of moral darkness, I think we live in a world of religious darkness. I mean, to hear Jeff talk about those that have come out of Hindu or Muslim backgrounds, and we know in our own society of all the almost, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, ridiculous belief systems that have developed in our world under the name of religion, but that darkness is still there. And because of that, people are just groping around trying to find some answers. Listen, it's a world of political darkness, and that darkness has corrupted governments. It's a world of moral darkness, which is why we struggle with immorality and crime and the devaluing of life that is so rampant in our society today. When we shine as the light of the world, when we fulfill our role, we illuminate the path through man's confusion, through the misunderstanding, through all of the darkness that exists in this world. Listen, all of you have had the experience where you get up in the middle of the night and the lights are out and you try to make your way across a room. In the most familiar room possible, in the darkness, you're a little bit more hesitant, aren't you? Because you're not sure what you left on the floor, or what the kids left on the floor, or where the furniture is when you get a little disoriented and it's dark and you can't see your way. That's a picture of our world. They think it's familiar. They think they know the way, but the truth is they're really more hesitant than they want to admit. Darkness and decay. That's what our world looks like. And that's what highlights the need for our role. As Paul described it in 2 Corinthians 5, we are ambassadors for Christ. We don't go out on the basis of our ability to change things, but we shine as a reflection of the true light of the world and as the one who can take away the sin of this world. But understand that Jesus never called anybody in vague or unclear terms. Jesus is very direct in this statement. You are the salt of the earth. Not you have the opportunity to be, or you can develop or be trained and equipped to be. Listen, there's discipling and equipping that we all need to be more effective in it, But the fact is, when we commit our lives to Christ, our role is established. We are the light of the world. We are the salt of the earth. And so we are to lovingly live and share the truth of Jesus Christ, why people need Him, how they can come to know Him, and how He can change their lives. But the second question I think that we need to answer is not just who are we, but what are the biggest challenges that I'm going to face? If I try to fulfill this role, if I try to be salt and light in this world, what are the struggles and the challenges that I'm going to face? Because any role comes with inherent challenges and risks and even danger. And he mentions a couple of them, probably the two most formidable challenges that we can face. Number one is our own carelessness. He says in verse 13 that the salt, if we're not careful, can become tasteless. It becomes tasteless. Now, the salt of that day is not refined like it is in our day. You know, it goes through all sorts of processes, and so the salt you have will be salty for a long, long time. But the salt of that day, if they weren't careful and they just brought it into a place to store it and they just dumped that salt on the ground, eventually, you know what would happen? The moisture in that ground would take all of the flavor out of that salt. So they had to be careful about the way they would cover the floors and store that salt so that it didn't become tasteless. If we're not careful, then we come in and we don't protect our witness. We don't guard what we do in such a way that our effectiveness becomes diminished. And it's really a picture of something becoming so familiar or so comfortable within our culture that we get dragged down by it. That we just make our home here and we live just like the world lives, and eventually we become tasteless. We're not a preservative anymore. We're not seasoning anything anymore. We've allowed ourselves to be worn down to the culture in which we exist. And so we have to stay on guard against letting the influences of the world wear us down. Whether it's what we watch on TV or movies or what we listen to or the people that we hang out with, over time they affect us. And often we never intend for it to happen. It's never our intention when we go into it to say, I'm going to allow these things to make me more like the world. It just happens over time as they gradually wear on us. That's why the wisdom and warning of Proverbs 2, I think, is so helpful. The Bible says there that discretion will guard you, and understanding will watch over you to deliver you from the way of evil. We need to use discretion and not ruin our effectiveness by simply leaving areas of our lives unguarded, by allowing ourselves to be tripped up by the things of this world. Because the truth is, you and I are not immune to their influence. We're not. As strong as we may think we are, those things can still harm us. They can still destroy us. That's why there are warnings throughout Scripture. Guard your heart, guard your mind, guard your eyes, guard your tongue. There is constantly that warning and that expectation that we place a guard over these aspects of our lives. Because many of us, in an effort to be near to people in this world, which, by the way, is a noble goal, and part of what being salt and light is, that we're going to be out there in this world. But if we're not careful, we get out near them and we allow ourselves to be affected by them rather than influencing them toward Christ. And then if we get affected by them and we become tasteless, as Jesus said, how can it be made salty again? Just think about it in practical terms. If we allow our influence to be diminished, how are we ever going to get that back? That's what Jesus is saying. Boy, when we claim to be a follower of Christ, and we suddenly start living like the world, and allowing its influences to wear off on us, and it damages our witness, in the eyes of people that are watching us. In essence, Jesus is saying, how are you going to get that back? They've lost trust in who we claim to be. Folks, I don't ever like to be one of these doomsday kind of guys, but I think in America, the church has lost its influence. I think we have allowed ourselves to be impacted by the world. And I'm talking about the churches, the way churches operate, the way Christians live their lives. And we're living in such a way that we now look like them. And so they say the church has no credibility left. You know what? They're at least partially right. Because we don't look any different. So Jesus said at that point, when you can't get it back, it's good for nothing except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You see, it's difficult, if not impossible, to regain lost influence. And so they will ignore us and cast aside what we claim to believe if it's not genuine. You want to know why the church is growing in some places in this world? In some of the most difficult, brutal, impoverished, authoritarian nations in this world? Because they are living differently, even to the point of death. And we can't get Christians to even stand up and say something at work or with their neighbors or in a conversation, hey, I don't think that's appropriate, because we're worried about what they may think about us, while others are giving their lives for the cause of Christ. And we wonder why the church in America is suffering. It's carelessness. The second big challenge and danger is deliberate sin on the part of believers. When he said, you're the light of the world, he said, a city set on a hill can't be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket. Why would you do that? Is in essence what Jesus is saying. That's not normal. And so in essence what he's saying is there are some believers, genuine believers now, who have made a choice to waste their influence and to reject their role. God has given them a platform, no matter how big or how small it is, and they have chosen to waste that influence. Listen, I want you to know, wherever God has called you to go, your influence may only be a handful of people, but if that's the platform that God has given you, don't waste the influence. And if you will be faithful in that, you know what God can do? God can multiply that influence. God can broaden it. I think we need to be careful about willful disregard of who we're called to be. And to hide that light under a basket, as Jesus described here, that's almost the equivalent to us saying, you know what, this world is lost and dark and fallen, and they hate us anyway. They deserve whatever they get. But need I remind us that were it not for the grace of God, we would be right there? It's deliberate sin on our part. And let's face it, it takes other forms. Sometimes we just get tired of being good. You ever get tired of being good? I mean, you look around at the world and they seem to be having a great time. They seem to be living without any consequences. Why can't I just live like that? And the temptation is to simply disconnect the wires for a little while. You know, those warning lights that go off when we stray off track? Sometimes we just want to cut the wires and just live like the world and have fun, have no consequences. And this is a terrible illustration, but I'm going to share it anyway just because I think it kind of points out what Jesus is talking about here. When I was a teenager growing up, I was considered by most people the nice kid, the nice guy that everybody liked. And, you know, when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, and you're the guy that all the mamas like, that ain't always the fun place to be, is it? Oh, he's such a nice guy. So I decided I was tired of being that. You know, you don't want to be the one the mamas like. You want to be the one the girls like. And so I decided I was going to stop being nice. I just went through one of those phases. I was just going to quit being the nice guy, and I was going to be a bad boy. The only problem was I really didn't know how to do it too well. So I didn't do it very effectively. So you know what came out? I just acted cocky and became a jerk. That's the quite honest truth. And you know what the end result of that was? Nobody liked me. You know, not only did the girls not still like me, but the moms never didn't like me that much more anyway. And that's sometimes what happens in us as Christians. We think we're going to play the role of the world, and we end up being outcast from both sides. All because we thought we were going to do it differently. And I love what Paul said in Ephesians 5:11. In encouraging us to live rightly, he says, do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them. That's being light, isn't it? To expose the deeds of darkness. Hey, when our light is hidden by our choices or because life wears us down, the beauty of our lives diminishes. So watch for the temptations. Watch for those dumb decisions that can damage your witness. Stay on guard against them. Are we going to live a sinlessly perfect life? Probably not. But we can make sure and strive to make it our goal that those moments of failure become fewer and farther between. Because we endeavor to be light in this world. And one final question then that I believe Jesus answers for us, and I think his answer is exactly what we need. And that is, okay, if this is my role, how do I fulfill it? How do I live it? Verse 16, let your light shine. You know what I think is behind that statement? The idea that light doesn't apologize for shining. It's just bold. You know, when you have to go wake your kids up in the morning and they're not wanting to get out of bed, what's one of the best ways to do it? Flip the lights on. It's bold. It's unavoidable. There's a response to that light coming on. And too many of us as Christians, we're just timid and apologetic about our faith. When Paul told Timothy, hey, God's not given us a spirit of timidity or of fear, but of power and love and discipline. I love the Message translation of this. It says, God doesn't want us to be shy with his gifts, but bold and loving and sensible. Be bold with your light. Confidence based on something substantive can have a powerful effect on those around us. More and more people in our world are just living lives gripped by anxiety and worry and depression and fear and so many other negative emotions. And for us to live with confidence in the power and goodness of God before people that are struggling with all those negative emotions, we become a beautiful, powerful witness to them of the difference that Jesus can make. And people are drawn to it as they, verse 16, see your good works. See, there may be few people in our world that will admit this, but most people are looking for someone who lives a real and genuine and confident life in something that matters. And they're hoping that that confidence is based on something substantive and not merely a false bravado. I would equate it to when the storms pass through and our children get nervous and scared at the lightning and the thunder and the wind and all those type things, and they look at us and they even ask the question, are we going to be okay? And as parents, we say, yes, everything's fine. You're going to be okay. Why? Because we've been through the storms before. We know that it sounds bad, it looks bad, it may even feel bad for a few moments. But eventually the storms pass. That's the role that we can have in this world, a confidence despite the storms. And the result, when they see our good works, verse 16 says, they will glorify our Father who's in heaven. So fulfilling my role is about the public expression of my faith so that others will notice. Verse 15, he says, when we light that lamp, we put it on lampstand. We don't hide it, but we set it right out in what was in their day the center of the house. It was unavoidable. It was intentional. We can't shy away from our culture because we're worried about what they may think or because it doesn't look like it used to or the way we wish it would. Now more than ever, our role is more critical today than it has ever been. That we as Christians shine in this world of darkness. And we put that light right on that lampstand, not on the basis of goodness that we possess, not on the knowledge that we have, not based on our religious endeavors, but based on the change that Christ has produced in us. We set it on that stand when we let Him shine through us. We allow Him to give our impact to this world however He sees fit. He can broaden it as wide as He wants it to go, but we're going to shine for Him. Put it on the lampstand. Verse 15 says, so it gives light to all who are in the house. A dark world needs it. Other believers need it. They need the encouragement of seeing us shine as well. We live the truth of a transformed life by Christ. New words, new thoughts, new attitudes, new ways of relating, new responses to what happens around us. That's our calling. To put it simply, if I am going to fulfill my role in this world, I can't ignore or avoid this world and fulfill my role. Folks, we can't come in here on Sunday mornings and have our holy huddles and enjoy ourselves together and then go back out in this world and try to hide it from the world. We need to be as bold on Monday at work as we are on Sunday at church. Listen, I'm not telling you to disrupt your office and ignore the rules that are in place. I'm saying that we ought to live to be salt that prevents decay and light that illuminates in darkness. You know what? You may not have the opportunity every day to share the message of Jesus Christ, but what you can do is live as a follower of Jesus Christ in your office. You can be the one who lives with dignity and civility and honor and compassion and encouragement to those that aren't. You have that opportunity. When you go to school and the rest of the kids are living one way, you can live a different way. When you're at the ballpark, when you're in your neighborhood, when you're out to eat, whatever you do, you have the opportunity to shine. If we're willing to take up what Jesus has called us to do. Remember, Jesus turned it and pointed it directly at us. He said, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Don't waste your influence. Don't ruin your witness. But shine brightly. Not so they pat you on the back and say, what a good guy you are. But so they see your Father. Because they know, you know what? I've watched you long enough to now know that that's genuine. And I know that nobody could do that unless they're changed. Point them to Jesus. Would you pray with me?